I have no mouth, and I must scream. By Harlan Ellison. Part 1.
Wimp. The body of Gorison hung from the pink pallet, unsupported, hanging high above us in the computer chamber, and it did not shiver in the chill, oily breeze that blew eternally through the main cavern. The body hung head down, attached to the underside of the pallet by the sole of its white foot. It had been drained of blood with a precise incision made from ear to ear under the lantern jaw. There was no blood on the reflective surface of the metal floor. When Gorison joined our group and looked up at himself, it was already too late for us to realize that once again, AM had duped us. It had been a diversion on the part of the machine. 3 of us had vomited, turning away from one another in a reflex as ancient as the nausea that had been produced it. Gorison went white. It was almost as though he had seen a voodoo icon and was afraid of the future.
"Oh, God,"
he mumbled and walked away. The 3 of us followed him after a time and found him sitting in his back to one of the smaller chittering banks, his head in his hands. Elwin knelt down beside him and stroked his hair. He didn't move, but his voice came out of his covered face quite clearly.
"Why doesn't it just do us in and get it over with? Christ, I don't know how much longer I can go on like this."
It was our 109th year on the computer. He was speaking for all of us. Nimdok, which was the name of the machine had forced him to use because AM amused himself with strange sounds, was hallucinating, and there were canned goods in the ice caverns. Gorison and I were very dubious.
"It's another shuck," I told them, like the goddamn frozen elephant Am told us. Benny almost went out of his mind over that one. He'll hike all the way, and it'll be purified of some damn thing. I say, forget it. Stay here. It'll have to come up with something pretty soon or we'll die.
Benny shrugged. 3 days it had been since we'd eaten worms, thick, ropey. Nimdok was no more certain. He knew there was the chance, but he was getting thin. It couldn't have been any worse there than here. Colder. But that didn't matter much. Hot, cold, hail, lava. Boils or locusts, it never mattered. The machine
Masturbated. That's the actual word. Masturbated. And we...
Let me take a little sip. That good tea. And we had to take it or die. Edwin decided us.
"I've got to have something, Ted. Maybe there'll be some barlet pears or peaches. Please, Ted, let's try it."
I gave in easily. What the hell? Mattered not at all. Ellen was grateful, though. She took me twice out of turn. Even that had ceased to matter. But she never came, so why bother? But the machine giggled every time we did it. Loud. Up there, back there, all around us, he snickered. It snickered. Most of the time, I thought of Am as it, without a soul. But the rest of the time, I thought of it as him, in the masculine, the paternal, the patriarchal. For he is a jealous people. Him, it, God as Daddy the deranged. We left on a Thursday. The machine always kept us up to date on the date. The passage of time was important, not to us, sure as hell, but to him, it, Am. Thursday. Thanks. Nimdok and Gorison carried Ellen for a while, their hands locked to each other, to their own, and each other's wrists, a seat. Benny and I walked over and after, just to make sure that if anything happened, it would catch one of us, and at least Ellen would be safe. Fat chance. Safe. It didn't matter. It was only 100 miles or so to the ice caverns, and the second day, when we were lying out under the blistering sun, he had materialized. He sent down some manna. It tasted like boiled boar urine. We ate it. In the third day, we passed through a valley of obsolescence filled with rusting carcasses of ancient computer banks. Am had been as ruthless with its own life as with ours. It was a mark of his personality. It swove for perfection. Whether it was a matter of killing off unproductive elements of his own world, filling bulk, or perfected methods of torturing us, Am was as thorough as those who had invented him. Now, long since gone to dust, could ever have hoped. There was light flittering down from above, and we realized we must be very near the surface. But we didn't try to crawl up to see. There was virtually nothing out there. It had been nothing that could be considered anything for 100 years. Only the blasted skin of what had once been the home of billions. Now there were only 5 of us. Down here inside, alone, with Am. I heard Ellen saying frantically, "No, Benny, don't! Come on, Benny! Don't, please!" And then I realized I had been hearing Benny murmuring under his breath for several minutes. He was saying, "I'm gonna get out! I'm gonna get out!" over and over. His monkey-like face was crumbled with an expression of beatific delight and sadness, all at the same time. The radiation scars Am had given him during the festival were drawn down into a mass of pink-white puckerings, and his features seemed to work independently of one another. Perhaps Benny was the lucky of us 5. He had gone stark, staring mad many years before. But even though we could call Am any damned thing we liked, we could think the foulest thoughts of fused memory banks and corroded base plates, or burnt our circuits and shattered control bubbles. The machine would not tolerate our trying to escape. Benny leaped away from me as I made a grab for him. He scrambled up the side of a small memory cube, tilted on its side and filled with rotten components. He squatted there for a minute, looking like a chimpanzee Am had intended him to reassemble. Then he leaped high, caught a trailing beam of pitted and corroded metal, and went up, hand over hand like an animal, till he was on a girdered? I guess that's girdered. Sip. Girdered ledge 20 feet above us. "Oh, Ted! Nimmock! Please help him! Get him down there!" She cut off. Tears began to stand in her eyes. She moved her hands aimlessly. It was too late. None of us wanted to be near him when whatever was going to happen, happened. And besides, we all saw through her concern. When Am had altered Benny during the machine's utterly irrational, hysterical phase, it was not merely Benny's face the computer had made like a giant ape's. He was big in the private parts. She loved that. She served us, as a matter of course, but she loved it from him. Oh, Ellen, pedestal Ellen, pristine, pure Ellen. Oh, Ellen the clean, scum filth. Gorson slapped her. She slumped down, staring at poor loony Benny, and she cried. It was her big defense, crying. We had gotten used to it 75 years before. Gorson kicked her in the side. Then the sound began. It was light. That sound, half and half white, something that began to glow in Benny's eyes and pulse through growing loudness. Dim sonorities that grew more gigantic and brighter as the light sound increased in tempo. It must have been painful, and the pain must have been increased with the boldness of white, the rising volume of the sound, for Benny began to mew like a wounded animal, at first softly, when the light was dim and the sound had muted, then louder as his shoulders hunched over. His back humped as though he was trying to get away with it. His hands folded across his chest like a chipmunk. His eyes tilted to the side. The sad little monkey face pinched in anguish. Then he began to howl, as the sound coming from his eyes grew louder, louder, and louder. I slapped the sides of my head with my hands, but I couldn't shut it out. It cut through easily. The pain shivered through my flesh like tin foil on a tooth. And then he was suddenly pulled erect. On the grinder he stood up, jerked to his feet like a puppet. The white was now pulsing out of his eyes in two great round beams. The sound quelled up and up some incomprehensible scale, and then he fell forward, straight down, and hit the plate steel floor with a crash. He lay there, jerking spastically as the light flowed around and around him, and the sound spiraled up out of normal range. Then the white beaked its way back inside his head. The sound spiraled down, and he was left lying there, crying piteously. His eyes were too soft, moist pools of pus like jelly. Am had blinded him. Gorson and Nimdok and myself, we all turned away, but not before we caught the look of relief on Ellen's warm, concerned face. End of part 1. OwO!